G'day everyone. Thanks for jumping on today. Alex from Inforcer, and we've got the lovely James joining us as well. Really pleased that you guys are taking the time out of your day to take a bit of a look at some of the content we're hoping to put together. This is the first of hopefully a sort of monthly series where we're really looking to essentially try and take in a lot of the inputs from our partners and prospective customers around a lot of the challenges that they're facing. And speaking with James and having known James for a little while now, we really think that this specific topic is really front of mind. Before I do hand over to James, I guess I'll give you a bit of a background about what we're hoping to deep dive into today. So, essentially, understanding it's a pretty common theme for a lot of you on the call today, but we've seen managed service revenue growth is continuing to decline. So, looking back at the 2022, 2023 area, your average MSA revenue growth was at the high 20s, maybe a little bit more for a lot of other businesses, and we're really starting to see that trend on its way down. The more and more we're speaking with partners, the real common theme that's appearing is winning new business is becoming harder and harder across the board. It's becoming more competitive, and I think the more and more I'm speaking to partners, the more time they're spending offboarding clients, right? So, really looking at that, competition is driving pricing down, more commoditized, and businesses are really struggling to see the value of traditional IT support. Okay, so really the key topics that we're hoping James can help, and obviously he'll give you a bit of a background around himself and where he fits into the ecosystem. But really wanting to touch on what that modern client looks like, and how is that looking to evolve in the future, how to evolve your capabilities and your service offerings to actually match the client needs and for now and in the future. And I think a really big piece around that is also how you operationalize these services and actually put them into practice, right? It's really great to come on these sessions with James and come away with some really great ideas, but putting into practice, building scalable solutions and tooling and processes around it is just as important. And really lastly, building a modern pricing, packaging and positioning to really set yourself apart. So for everyone, the most common question we usually get on these things is this being recorded? Yes, we are. So for anyone who isn't going to be jumping on today, feel free. We'll be sending this out to everyone that jumps on. But have had the pleasure of working with James for a few years in previous roles. And yeah, without further ado, more than happy for him to run you through who he is and how he helps.
Thanks, Alex. It's great pleasure to be on today. For anyone that doesn't know me, I'm the Chief Strategy Officer of the TSP Advisory, and my whole day job is working directly with the leading partners in the APAC region to help them transform for the modern future, to meet their clients' needs now and as things continue to change, transform their business models, what their solution portfolios look like, their org design, and really help them scale and grow in different ways. So hopefully I can bring some insights into what we're doing in that leading edge and what's working. And what I'd warn you now is I'm going to hit you with a lot of content. So take away what you can, rewatch the video in the future, but just know that you should only focus on doing one thing at a time. A lot of people get overwhelmed by everything that they need to do, and it's more important to execute on one thing at a time. And as Alex said, before I start jumping into the real meat of the content, we've got challenges in our industry. The growth rate of traditional managed services revenue is declining, and like what he said, the sort of average is around 13% growth according to Canalys globally for this year is the expected rate. But I'd say from my experience, that's just an average. So what we're actually seeing is the majority of partners are actually a lot lower than that. They're either maybe growing 5-10% at most, with quite a few partners declining. But then there's a real handful of winners that are growing rapidly above that 20, 30, 40% growth rate in their businesses. And there is a lot of opportunity there to do a lot of different things. But that growth, to me, is probably less important than what you're seeing up on the screen at the moment. And it's actually profitability. So you can grow revenue, but there's no point growing revenue if it's not profitable. The industry average is for technology services businesses, we're operating at 6% EBITDA. So a light breeze can knock us over. And at any one time, 25% of the industry is break even or losing money. So we really need to do better. And there are high performers out there. So my hope for today is people take away some ideas that are actually going to help drive them to be high performance. So let's dive in. I'm going to talk you through a whole bunch of different content, but what's important is to understand where we've come from. The majority of partners out there have been around 20 odd years. They started as break fix shops. They evolved into MSPs. But that's where most of us have stopped. Right? We're still acting like it's 2010. We're still acting like the SBS server is going to make a comeback. We're not evolving our thinking. And so let's break that down a little bit. Why? So when we started, client environments were simpler in a lot of ways, but the back-end technology was difficult. So we created our businesses in our local area because we're the small business technologists that could basically solve any problems. We were able to jump on and fix those really poorly configured networks. The servers would fall over. Even with SBS as sort of a quality product, they were very difficult to administer. So all our value is coming in from that sort of technical expertise to fix broken things. And as we progressed, as we realized, hey, we could fix price this instead of those waves of months where we'd make a lot because lots broke, and then the next month it'd be quiet because we're charging by the hour. We realized we could fix price this and do better from a proactive perspective. And what happened was when we created those packages, most people basically looked at how much is the client spending. Let's just chuck 20% contingency on it, fixed price it, and away we go. That's our managed services. And what that created is a whole bunch of legacy arrangements that are underpriced and weren't built with a pricing methodology to scale. We've also seen over time that people haven't been increasing their prices. So as our margins have been shrinking, we have been impacted the most. There's a reason why we're operating at 6% EBITDA. It's because of all of these sort of combinations of where we've come from. And so we've got a lot of legacy baggage, let alone the fact that when I mentioned that word proactive, I'd say my experience from seeing hundreds of partners in the region, that most never actually reached a true MSP. All they've done is fixed price, end user support and infrastructure management services, but they've never rolled out proper proactive maintenance regimes. They haven't driven life cycles in their clients. It's all just been basically operating as a time and materials business with fixed price revenue. And that's where, as we progress, I want you to think about this, because this is affecting a lot of our businesses to this day, and this is why we're going to need to transform. And as we've progressed over the years, we've kept this mindset. So if you think about the way that most partners are approaching cybersecurity, we've been treating it as a bolt-on. We've been seeing some products driven by vendors. We've gone from those traditional packages that we created that might have had an AV rolled into by default as a bundle. But as we've been seeing the cybersecurity, we've seen all these products that we need to roll out, and then we've gone with a product-led approach. We've not had that purposeful, why are we needing to do cybersecurity? What's our frame of reference for it? How does it impact clients? How do we engage clients to meet them where they're at to lift their postures? We've gone, there's these things, how do we add that to our nebulous packages that we've created? And we keep getting stalled because either clients aren't engaging it and they aren't buying into what we're selling, or even if we have, what we've done is driven a very unprofitable engagement again. Canal has reported at least 60% of the industry is running less than 40% gross margins on their cyber services. So the majority of the industry is already unprofitable. we're running at 40%, again, that's what's driving our very low EBITDA performance. So again, we've kept those methodologies of the past, and we keep making the same mistakes. And this is really affecting us, probably a lot more than what we think. We've touched on the lack of business growth, but why that's happening is because there's more competition than ever. The commoditization, everyone's driving the prices down. So we're not actually just got a unique value prop to bring to the market, and we're ending up competing on price. On top of that, what I'm seeing more than ever is the increasing client churn. And there's two sides to that. There's the some of the uncontrollable things. There's the ATO and IRD have cracked down on zombie businesses and have been putting them into administration and insolvency. There's been our baby boomer business owners are starting to exit in droves, and there's consolidation in those industries. We're at the economic swing where people and organisations are bringing IT back in-house to save on perceived costs. And people are looking for cost savings, because why wouldn't you when it's a commodity? But that's only about 40% of the churn that I see. The majority of the churn I see, because I'm on the working with the partners directly that are starting to pick up all these clients, is 60%. And that's clients looking for more mature partners. They're looking for people that are going to help them with their GRC approach and help them with providing advice around their digital transformation. It's a very different approach, but that's what our clients are needing. While we're stuck on this, I've already touched on poor margins, and that's not just from our poor pricing methodology, even though that's a key component. It's also the way that we actually operate things. The fact that we're still operating through reactive measures. We don't typically have proper standards in place. We're not leveraging automation and tools properly, and we're often overspending on tools because we're not properly implementing them. I can guarantee the average sort of $1 million MSP out there, I can walk in and probably save them $2 to $3 grand without really knowing their business, because they've got this swathe of tools that they don't use, or they've overcommitted to things that they don't actually need. And right there is just a symptom of the way that we operate our businesses. We're not looking at our finances. We're not looking at our efficiencies. We're not measuring things. And this is what flows into the wasted time that we do. Because again, we're doing it reactively. We half do initiatives where we're burning time on agreements that aren't profitable. And that's impacting us significantly. That's why we feel so tight. We're busy doing busy work, and it's not really affecting it. So I've mentioned a whole bunch that we're doing wrong. There's a few other things that I'll point out as it leads into the sort of the next thing. Is one of the things that I'm really noticing in the partner base is the average partner out there doesn't actually understand modern technology. We're still stuck. If you think about that map again of the traditional network, we're still stuck on thinking about things with servers on-prem, the network infrastructure around that, and the end user device. And that's our world. But as we're changing, and I'll explain a bit more in the next section, the architecture and the concepts and what we deliver and why has changed significantly. And this is really impacting partners, because we're always starting with technology first. So if we don't even understand what modern environments look like, we're already way behind the 8 ball on being able to create solutions and understand what's next. So before I keep rabbiting on, Alex, is there any thoughts or questions that you have from that segment?
100%. I think one thing that we certainly see, and I think a lot of the people in the industry probably don't invest as much time on, but like actually reviewing your agreements. I think you mentioned on it, partners selling the same price managed service offering that they did 2 or 3 or 4 years ago in some cases. I guess from your end, like what would you say is best practice and how partners are reviewing and monitoring their offerings in terms of commercially and what's included?
we need to do it a lot more frequently, and I'll talk about how to set this up in a future segment. But firstly, we just need to measure it properly. The hygiene around even simple things like time entry are still a major problem in the industry. We've got these PSA tools that we can set up and configure the contracts and agreements well, that we can capture the data of how much we're selling it for, how much the hard costs are for it. But we don't track our time. So we can't even measure our profitability. So if you don't have that level, you can't really review a whole lot. But when you do, it can be quite scary of how unprofitable a lot of your arrangements are. And probably the other one that I'd mentioned before we keep moving on is, once you do have those profitability metrics, the best thing that you can do in your organization is do a ranking of your clients by how much revenue they generate, what their profitability is that they're generating over a year. And you'll be surprised to see that the average partner, it's usually the top 5 to 8 clients are generating 80% of their revenue or margin. So all this fear that we have around raising prices, losing clients, actually empowers us to see that data and start making better decisions, and we're not latching onto that legacy. And I've seen when people have gone through that process, it's so freeing, and they actually get themselves unstuck to go and drive, and that creates a whole bunch of growth and a whole bunch of increase in profitability as well.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think investing the time to get the right data in front of you so you can make educated decisions.
100%. And this is where we need to start, so as we start to go into the next segment, think about what we just said there around the investment of time. And so what I'm going to do in this segment is lead off from that comment I made in the list of what we're doing wrong, and the conversation line I meant around the technology areas and how we're thinking. What we need to start thinking is modern. What's made us successful in the past isn't going to be successful in the future. The environments of the past are not coming back. We've shifted, and I'm going to take you through why and what the future sort of looks like, so you can start thinking about that. And the first little area I'm going to start talking about is the big bets of the future. I'm going to skim over this because I'm going to come back to it. But there's really 8 core areas. And when you start looking at this and start thinking about it, a lot of this isn't traditionally what we've done. So we're going to have to transform our skill sets, our way of engaging clients, and our capabilities in these different areas. And why is that? Well, things have changed. I've touched on the modern environment. If you compare the first map of a client's environment to now, the complexity has increased. And this is where, for a lot of the guys that have been around a long time, they've always seen that everything's complex, but it's a different kind of complexity. In the past, the complexity was in the tech. It was the fact that we had the multiple servers, the way that we had to manage exchange, the way that we had to connect networks, all of that kind of stuff was a lot more difficult than it is today. The complexity now is actually the broadness of technology. It's the fact that people are working from anywhere. They're more flexible in their working hours. That's what's creating the complexities for organizations. And it's not necessarily the technical side themselves. And so what we need to start doing is viewing things differently. Now, I've started off talking a bit about the tech, and I'm skimming over it, even though there's a lot of detail in here, because what's actually important, what we've gotten wrong over a long amount of time, is we're not thinking from a client's perspective. What's really important, and we need to start understanding, is the client's businesses. I'm sure for many of you've had clients telling you don't understand my business. And it's true, because I can guarantee I'm probably being generous, but 90% of the market does not understand their clients. And what I mean by that is their actual business operations. We think we understand our clients' business because we understand their infrastructure. Clients don't care about their infrastructure. They just want it to work. And that was our traditional value. We made it work for them and we made it stable. So we've solved a lot of problems as technology caught up. But what's important now is being able to bring the right advice, being able to leverage technology for clients to actually get an outcome. And so what I'm going to take you through is a few key components as you think about it. The segments of clients. We need to understand what segments we actually play in. And here I've got 4. I should probably add a 5th. What it really is think about your micro businesses, your small business, the medium business, mid-market, enterprise, government. We know we play in some. The average partner is usually working with micro, small, or medium, or they're working with small, medium, and the mid-market. Right there's a problem and a challenge. If we're working in more than 2 segments that aren't next to each other, we're going to have a conflict. And this is what most partners are facing. Their top anchor clients that I mentioned before, they might be medium-sized businesses. The majority of our clients are small, and we'll have a long tail of micro businesses. The micro business and medium business do not operate the same, and they have very different needs, and the offerings are very different. The engagements are different, the maturity, all of that, everything's different. And that's what creates the conflict for us. That's what creates the inefficiencies, because all of a sudden we're having to either spread people across this and we can't have consistent conversations. We can't deliver consistently. We can't sell the same things. And that's what creates all of these inefficiencies. And that's the same for these segments that have the small, medium, and mid-market businesses. The small and mid-market operate completely different. So when you're starting and looking at your client base, understanding the segments as a starting point really give you that frame of reference to start questioning, where do I want to play? Where do I bring the most value? Where are my best clients? And how do we engage with that? And how do we duplicate that to create more business? For everything to everyone, we're going to be nothing to everyone, because we become generic and commoditized. But again, our clients want us to understand their business. How can we understand their business if we're spread too thin? So when we dive in a little bit further, we've got our segments. Now what verticals? Each one of these are very different. And we all know that, but the majority of partners are very horizontal. So if you're trying to understand the client's businesses, how can you understand and be able to talk to with a level of authority and expertise if you've got multiple verticals here? There's nothing wrong with having 2, 3 main verticals that are similar to each other, and there's consistent attributes, and you can create consistency. But the reason why I bring this up is when you start scratching the surface of a business, their technology needs are very different. This ecosystem that they play in is different. The way that they purchase and utilize technology is very different. That whole CapEx versus OpEx comes into play. The way their workforce actually operates, the type of line of business applications they use are all very different. This might not have mattered so much when we were infrastructure and end user support, because we didn't bother doing application support. All we did was elevate and vendor manage. We didn't know what has to happen in the application. We just made sure the infrastructure was available. But when we start having to elevate, we're going to need to know a lot more knowledge about these industries and talk to them. Because when you take the next step down, we need to start thinking about the key roles in the business. Traditionally, we've been very operational, and we would work with a key contact. We would work with the operations people, the practice managers, the venue managers, the operations managers, because we were responsible for keeping the lights on and resolving issues so people can function. But technology's expanded out from that. And if we're not involved with all these other people, we're having the wrong conversations. And a great example is cybersecurity. Most of us are trying to have cybersecurity conversations with the practice managers. they don't care. It's a cost to their operations. They only care when something goes wrong. Whereas if you're talking to the board level, they're responsible as directors and liable. They care about that governance and risk approach across their business. And this is where you start expanding it out to thinking about how are you helping leverage technology across their people operations functions, their sales and marketing, their finance. We traditionally haven't done that. We don't have relationships with a lot of those people in the right ways to understand what they do day to day and be able to bring them value. And that's why the traditional managed services are reducing, because there's less issues and technology is getting simpler and what they care about has completely changed. And once you start thinking about their business, like there's some generic things that happen. They care about their business growth. They've got rising business cost challenges as well. They've got employee challenges. They're being disrupted. The regulation and legislation's changing. We've got all of these things going on, and each business type and size has different ways to solve these and leverage technology to do it. And that's what they're looking for us to bring. And you can boil this right down to these sort of three areas. They care about growth, they care about profit, and they care about reducing their risk and impact of anything happening to that growth or profit. And we can easily frame that up, and it's very easy to start meeting the clients where they're at when we understand their businesses. It's a very different mindset, very different approach. And you can see that through our traditional approaches. We're reactive. So I can tell you the majority, I know this, not just from the way that we service our clients on our help desks and manage it in centralized services and deliver projects. It's also the way that we sell to our clients. The majority of account managers in our industry are just order takers. They're waiting for a client to ask for something. But that's exactly the opposite of what the clients want from us. The clients want us to come to meet them where they're at, lead them through conversations to help them make decisions and bring them solutions to challenges that they're facing, burning needs now, but also for the future so they can keep going on a journey. And again, for a lot of us, we're going to have to flip that script. And so what we need to start doing is creating some structure. I'll use cybersecurity as an example. We've been reactive, we've been product-led. The way to be mature around this is have a frame of reference. And what better frame of reference in the cybersecurity space than established global frameworks? Most people have gone down the Essential 8 road and haven't had traction because it's not really an implementable framework, let alone it's not certifiable. The more mature partners have gone down ISO 27001 for themselves. And that's helped mature, that's helped open a lot of supply chain that they haven't had access to before. And so when you're looking at this, if you apply a framework approach and understand what the best practices are, then you've got something to aim for. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be super mature as soon as you start the process, but you go on a journey of that continual improvement with a frame of reference. And so let's come back to the technology quickly as we're wrapping this up. Hopefully, with that information about thinking about the client first, now the technology actually starts to become important again. If we lead with technology, clients don't care. Clients need us to understand their business, understand their challenges, everything I've just explained. And so when you start understanding that and start mapping it to the modern world and the modern solutions, you can start reframing it and repositioning it in a much better way. And as I go to the next slide to bring up the big bets again, what starts to become increasingly obvious is a lot of us won't have the capability to deliver this all. There's so many different skill sets and specialities here. And all businesses are going to need this sort of broadness in technology. So we need to get our head around it. But there's something that I want you to remember as we progress through. You don't need to necessarily deliver it. So before I keep going, Alex, is there anything that springs to your mind from me rambling in this segment?
Definitely not rambling, James. I think, yeah, it's really, really topical content that I think is front of mind. And Daniel in the chat has actually asked a pretty good question, which you might have some feedback or thoughts around. Essentially, he has a client on a flat rate managed support plan. 3 months after onboarding the client, they realized, or the client actually asked for their video recording cameras to have some sort of checks and services as they were trying to read back or recall video footage. Now, it wasn't part of their managed service. I guess the question Daniel's asking is, looking at that onboarding and even back in the pre-sale journey, are there any cunning ways of actually capturing a lot of those unvoiced needs prior to the client onboarding? So yeah, any strategies or really, I guess, tailored best practice in uncovering those needs from the client?
So there's two schools of thought here. We've been very ingrained in a lot of the generic thought leadership that we need to cover everything because we've got one package. So we need to capture all the information so we mitigate the risk of that package. So if that's still your strategy, then what you have to be aware of is doing better discovery as part of the onboarding, is leveraging tools to expand out and knowing that these things are going to be asked for and highlighting them as an onboarding. So having a frame of reference again around their IT environment. If you know that there's that map of all the possible technology, create an assessment so that you can, even if you don't deal with it, even if you've got no plans to deal with it, at least you can capture that information even just by talking to the client. That's one way to do it. The other way, which actually leads in perfectly as I transition in, is looking at different ways to actually position and packaging your services to meet client needs. I personally, and there's no right or wrong, I don't want anyone to take my advice as pure gospel and you need to do exactly what I tell you. My personal opinion is that the days of that vague one-size-fits-all package are dead. And I'm going to tell you why. Because what's happened is basically we've created one generic package. All I need to go onto every day of every forum that I view is always asking, what's in my stack? What's in your stack? How much are you charging? And we're copying and pasting everyone. That's what's causing our road to commoditization. But also that ultra generic commoditized package is not going to suit all the needs of all our various different clients. And so as I go through this section, I want you to think about that and what's going to be right for your clients. Again, there's no one size fits all answer. Anytime I engage with a partner, I have frameworks and I have methodologies to doing things, but we always start with who's our ideal clients? What are we trying to solve? Then it's a lot easier to make the right decisions for what we're trying to deliver. And so as we dive in here, I just want to open this up. In our industry, we've become generic. The term MSP has just been used as a ubiquitous term in vendor and disty land for partner. We know from what I spoke around the break fix into the MSP space. An MSP is really that infrastructure management and end user support firm. But SIs and VARs and other models want to become MSPs until they realize it doesn't just mean recurring revenue. They realize they have to do something else. And so as we're commoditizing, what I've been doing for the last few years is challenging everyone around the next iteration, the technology solutions partner concept. I don't believe in the whole MSP 3.0 conversation because as you've seen, and as I'll talk about a lot more, a lot of those big bets are not just bolt-ons to what we've always done. they're dramatic changes in our level of capabilities, the skills, our mindsets. We can't just bolt it on. There's a reason why cybersecurity has been failing us. We're trying to bolt it on rather than understand that it's a different game. And so this technology solutions partner concept, very quickly, is it's just a modern view of different business models. There's no one size fits all, just become an MSP and there's only one true way to do it. It's really just understanding where you sit with the clients. Ultimately, people are going to become that advisor, and they're likely the brokers and the boutiques. There's going to be the specialists in the, they could be in Azure, they could be in networking, whatever. And then there's the scale players. The scale players are driving commoditization. They can automate everything far better than everyone else. They're leveraging offshoring. They can make huge margins by volume. But for us in the average partner space, we need to pivot because we're stuck in that MSP model that's built for scale, and we're not scaling. And most of us are wanting deliberate lifestyle businesses. And so that's very counter to what we need to do. And having that awareness allows you to open up. And so when we start to think about like what's new, going to the how do we reposition our packaging? Well, firstly, what we need to do is get out of the tech. If there's anything that you've taken away from a lot of my ramblings today, is what's more important is understanding our client's business. We know we're experts in tech, and we know we need to keep broadening our perspective around that, but we need to start elevating ourselves to an advisory status. We need to start understanding our client businesses. This is how we need to start monetizing. We've got to stop giving away advice for free. When we do this properly, this is like $300 to $500 an hour type of work, not $100 to $200 tech work. And for a lot of people, that's going to be challenging. But a lot of businesses want this. They will pay for this because they get the value. This is the exciting part for me, is as we evolve, as the dynamics change, we can actually affect businesses and give them an ROI, not just keep the lights on. And so when you start thinking about this and starting from that advisory perspective, starts opening up different opportunities in different technology areas. And so I'll break those technology areas down for you around these 12 major categories. And we all know under these 12 major categories, there's a whole bunch of different subcategories. And this is what I want to show the reality on why I'm so positive, why there are partners that are growing so fast. It's actually, there's a huge ocean of opportunity. You just need to get out of where you are now and look in a different way to unlock a whole bunch of opportunity. This creates revenue, margin, but most importantly, the better that we do at this, the better the outcomes are for the clients. Their businesses will be better off when we transform our approach. When we start looking at the demands, we're getting halfway through the 2025. I can tell you, working with a whole lot of partners, the ones that are growing have shifted their focus onto these. They're not just trying to sell those generic managed services. They're going in from a business outcome led. Now, I might not have presented it this way. I'm drawing you in from the technical side because that's what most of us default to. So see what shiny products and technology are out there, and then we'll work out how to monetize it later. But these are the areas that are growing. These are the areas that clients are investing in because this is what's creating better things for their business. They're either reducing risk, they're increasing efficiencies, or they're enabling scale and growth. Again, those three areas of growth, profit, risk. And we can position that way to engage the clients and meet them where they're at. And one thing I'll just quickly point out on this is just look at the modern secure desktop. Most of us are defaulting to Windows 11 is what we need to upgrade. Windows 10 is coming end of life. There's big demand. That's not how clients see it. That might be in certain organizations where they've got the IT managers and CIOs and stuff, the technical people, but the average business person doesn't care. What it actually is, we've come up to the lifespan of those old devices. So for them, they're only going to upgrade when it dies, or if we've proactively helped them do a life cycle. Anyone that's been around this industry long enough has seen the jump to XP, the jump from XP to Windows 7, 7 to 10. This was the same back then. People didn't get excited about a new operating system. They had a need to make sure their people stayed productive and had the latest performance and not cumbersome old gear. And so that's the sort of thinking we need to change from. Stop getting sucked into the tech first and start meeting where the clients are at. And so I've hit you with a lot of different technology very quickly. I want you to start thinking about monetization. I touched on advisory. There's actually 5 other value streams that you can make money. We've got to stop seeing things as transactional. In the past, we would just sell a major project, a server upgrade, a network upgrade. They were big. They were complex sometimes. And we've just been that lift and shift type approach, that transactional approach. But when you look at these value streams, there's actually client journeys. If you overlay the 12 solution categories, you will end up with multiple things in each one of these value streams as solutions. So all of a sudden, you're either creating recurring revenue from services or SaaS products. You're creating more demand for some procurement projects through implementation, solution design, and end user enablement. There's so much money to be made, but it's going to be very different to how we've done it in the past. It's not lift and shift. It's not these big projects. It's a lot of microservices and a lot of continual improvement and engagement that grows our revenue. At the start of this, we touched on the declining growth in our traditional managed services. What Lava didn't mention was the steep decline in project services profitability. Even the high performers in the traditional space are seeing continued decline. And that's because this change from the large project base to these micro projects. Our delivery methodology isn't up to scratch, which it always hasn't, but we've been able to patch over it because of large projects. But also our sales regimen doesn't match up to selling a whole bunch of small things because we're not talking to our clients enough. We rely on that order to come through and we'll win because we'll get a $20,000 project, where now what's happening is we're likely to get $20,000 of revenue, but that will be 4, 5, or 6 projects worth of effort. And we're going to see that shrink. So we're going to have to transform that approach. And so as we think about how we create a need and see where our clients are, what we need to realize is there's a hierarchy of needs here. You know, we've done the availability piece at our base of the pyramid. That's what we built our value on. We've evolved into, as we became a bit more mature as an MSP, we stepped into the layer 2. Generally, most of us are doing that well. There's a lot of improvements that need to happen, but it's sort of business as usual. There's a reason why it's a commodity now. Once organizations have those base, they start wanting to open up into the higher layers. This is what opens up all those new opportunities. This is why we're having to broaden our approach to technology and open up across the technology categories. And it's something that we need to really think about. And it's a way to set some maturity and create that framework to understand where clients are at and take them on a journey. Going back to that assessment piece that I mentioned earlier. And I know I'm rambling and there's a lot to take in, but what's really important, going back to one of the things I called everyone out on, we've been really poor on pricing things up. We don't have a methodology. I'm just going to say it. If you're jumping on a forum and going, what does everyone else charge? And you copy them, what do you expect to happen? The industry is operating at 6% EBITDA. I'm not sure I want to copy the average MSP out there, because all I'm going down is the road of low profitability. The people that are successful have methodologies around their productise solutions. They understand the pricing methodologies across these different types of pricing, these different types of engagements. And when you tie this back to those value streams, different value streams will have different pricing methodology. The different solutions will have different pricing methodology. The sprint towards everything being recurring revenue, while recurring revenue is super important and valuable, people are shutting off the idea that they can make money in one-time revenue, and they're missing a whole bunch of opportunity. So I want you to think about that not all the generic advice is very good, because we're seeing the outcome of it. And yes, most people haven't implemented it very well. So there are people that are successful, but again, you need to choose what's right for your business model, what's right for your clients. There's no right or wrong answer. And as I start to go through a few more things, one of the big call outs I want to do quickly is most partners don't know the difference between markup and gross margin. So we think we're doing 20% gross margin, but we've only done 20% markup. Well, 20% markup's only like 16% gross margin. So we're losing all this profitability by using the incorrect methodology. I know there's a lot in this, and I'm gonna come back to Dan's question as I start to get through and wrap up. We need a process around getting a solution through and doing it properly. Most of us just randomly get a request from a client and then we scramble to create a solution, and we get it wrong because we don't package it right, we don't price it right. Or we create something because we've gone to a conference and we see something shiny and we need to wrap it in, but then we're not positioning. We have no positioning or messaging around it. We've got no commercials around it, and we cause other problems. So we need to start adopting a methodology for bringing everything together. And as I throw Alex in to stop me rambling for a second, just think about where you need to start. Like what do your clients need? Where are they in the segmentation and verticals? And then you can start working backwards. It may make sense if we're working with micro businesses to have a easy consumable offering. In the medium-sized business, they may need a bit more flexibility. They engage you from an advisory perspective, and then you sell them a solutions portfolio. Maybe as you start to get to the mid-market, you need your discrete managed services offering for network management, infrastructure management, this, that, and they engage and you land and expand that way. There's no right way, but you need to understand that there's these different variations and it's not a one size fits all. So Alex, stop me from talking.
Man, I don't really want to open up a can of worms, but whenever I sort of see this sort of content, the question I always ask is, and I see partners ask all the time, is around specialization and understanding your sort of target customer profile. How well does that align to them becoming that advisory or being able to offer those advisory services and understanding your clients? What might be some of your thoughts around that?
So the specialization in sort of certain verticals, I think, is critical. And people cringe at that because we usually hear that from the US. That's how you grow. You specialize in on a certain verticals or a certain technology, and you can be a lot more focused. And it's true. But we've always seen down in our part of the world that we've got limited opportunities to do that. But that's because we're thinking about local. When we started our business, we pretty much served anyone in like a 1 to 2 hour drive radius, and those were our clients. We needed to worry about if we could jump in the car and service them. It's a global market now. So if you're specializing in, let's just say, a professional engineering, you might only have like 10 companies around your area that you can drive to, but there's thousands across the state, the country, expanding into the region. The numbers just grow larger and larger. You don't need to be right next door to service them anymore. And I think that's a huge mentality shift that partners need to go through. And the specialization allows you to properly market, talk the right way, create the right solutions, create consistency, understand your clients. And I think that's where most people get hung up, is because they're just worried about if they can jump into their car and get away. I'm mindful of time. I could talk about this stuff for hours and hours. And so we're coming up to our last section and our wrap up. We need to generate profit. If I haven't drummed it in enough, we're not profitable. And profit's not a dirty word. The most successful partners are highly profitable, have happy clients and happy employees. They've got the money to reinvest into things. We're not stressing, we're not surviving. We're delivering great outcomes for our clients. We're not ripping them off. Too many of us think if we're making a profit, we're ripping people off. Actually, what we've been doing for so long is subsidizing poor business practices in our clients and not giving them an incentive to change. Because if there's no financial change, then they're not going to invest, because we've got them covered. I'm going to quickly whip through. I brought this up. These are the benchmarks of margins when you look at our different services. There's big gaps between the high performers and the industry average. So clearly, there's people that are doing even worse than the industry averages. So if you're not at the industry average, aim for that. If you're at industry average, aim for what the high performers are doing. And this goes back to your question before, Alex, around how do I assess how well I'm doing? Start to use these sort of metrics. But as we look at our operations, there's a few levers that we can affect that profitability. I'm not going to go through each one here, but in essence, they come down to the same things. I'm going to sound like a cliched Big Four consultant. Increase your prices, drop your costs, look at headcount. It really isn't rocket science, but not enough of us understand the financial aspect or invest in increasing our confidence around how to read it. There's plenty of help out there for this. This is well-trodden ground, but we need to start doing something, because a light breeze could knock you over. A few of the anchor client or two, if they left you, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. You don't have the profit to ride it out. And transformation costs as well. You need that money to invest. So we've got a window here on our traditional services and approaches to lift that up. But we also need to start looking at how we structure our orgs differently. Traditionally, in most partners, we will just have our support team and our project team. That's how we deliver service. What we need to start expanding out to is how are we providing advisory? How are we delivering digital transformation on the application layer? How are we providing scalable automated services so that we can be more efficient? It's a big shift, but it's necessary to think about this sort of framework so that we've got something to aim for. If you're smaller, you might not be able to have dedicated resources in each of these areas, but you need to start seeing these as different functions, because they have different operating models, they have different levers for profitability and growth. And without doing that, we dumb our business down too much and we're not successful at any. If you think about those gross margins that I showed you earlier, there's a reason why the averages are quite low. We're not reporting on it well enough. We're not setting up the methodology. We're not having the right people delivering the right things in the right ways, because we've oversimplified and made generic systems on thought leadership we've heard that we haven't understood all the nuance. And so as you think about that restructure and you take you back to the technology, I mentioned a few times, when you start to look at those broad capabilities, your big bets, and you probably don't have those capabilities, well, we need to make deliberate decisions of how we're going to deliver solutions to our clients. Our default is always to build. For a lot of us, that have started out a long time ago, we had to be the only person in town because we were. We had to try and do as much as possible for our clients because there weren't other people that could realistically help them. But things have changed dramatically. There's a lot more specialists out there that are scaling down to be able to deliver cost-effective solutions to the small business space, and that opportunity to partner with the right organizations are just increasing. So you need to look at what your demand in your client base is, what you want to focus on, and then choose to build or acquire that talent, those clients, those businesses, or you look to partner. And for many of us, that's not our mindset, but we need to change that because the ones that are partnering are growing a lot faster than the ones that aren't. The more that you keep everything to yourself that you can't deliver, the less value you're actually providing to a client. You have to think client first. What do they need? What can I help them solve? That's the value that you bring. You don't have to do the work to be the valuable party in this. Bring you back to the framework approach. Frameworks, whether it's a well-established standard in cybersecurity, or whether you're creating standards internally and documenting that and creating those internal frameworks, are what enable you to scale and grow. More detail you have around what you roll out to your clients, how and why, it creates that repeatability. It opens up the ability for us to look at automation, how to be more efficient. Without that, we just float about. Our teams do different things every time. That just creates more and more inefficiencies. But it also opens up our cyber risks. Okay, as I jump to the next slide, the cyber posture of most partners out there is terrible. Their tech teams don't understand cyber approaches. They open up ports. They do silly things. They're stuck in the mindset that what's most important is getting something up and running. But in that, they're opening up a whole bunch of risk because we haven't educated them well enough. But the other things to think about here of lifting our operating practices is looking at different areas. Again, if we've got a framework, we can tick off a list. We can do one thing at a time. These sort of things we should be thinking about, and we should be thinking about our operational practices with security in mind. I just told you what we're doing. Everything that we should be doing, we should have security by default. If we're creating a network, we should create segmentation with it. If we're running an M365 tenancy, it should have multi-factor authentication on it. All of these sort of approaches we need to do by default, but we're not going to do it without transforming our approach and implementing processes and procedure. When you look at cybersecurity, and I mentioned the whole, we're not very profitable in this area at all. We need to start thinking about the manual effort involved. This is what we didn't take into account back in the day. But there's so many different options here to increase our profitability and increase our efficiency. I'll call out, because I'm on Inforcer's webinar, M365 management. So few partners actually use a scalable approach to setting policies, securing it, hardening it, the configuration of it, and then the ongoing management. We do that. We either don't do that or we do it manually. Right there is a value add and an improvement straight away. And last, I just want to wrap this up with our mindset. We need to get out of that reactive break fix. We need to get to proactive governance. And what I mean by that is we need to measure the right things, have the right standards and frameworks in place, and then drive that through, and then make sure we're compliant to that. It's a more effort, but it's gonna pay off. And so, wrapping up, before I throw back to Alex for us to finish, what I want you to take away from this session is set some goals, identify where you want to head, what the gaps are to get there, create a plan, share that with your team, work the plan, and then keep reviewing it. too many of us hear this stuff and then don't do anything, but put it into action. So Alex, over to you to wrap up. People are sick of me.
Mate, well timing. I think it just clicked on 1 o'clock here, but no, look, great content, and I think just based on the engagement today, I think it's definitely resonated with a lot of the team on here. I think, you've shared your takeaways, and I think for mine, it's, knowing your numbers, knowing where your business is at, give yourself the opportunity to make informed decisions, and from there really guide through onto the next steps. But James, obviously you got some of your tags here, and for anyone that doesn't follow James on LinkedIn, I highly recommend following and on all these channels, post really relevant content that I think, really can add a lot of value in your day and a lot of the topics that you guys are asking us about. So James, thank you very much for joining on today. Really glad for everyone who's taken the time to jump on. We'll look to continue these on for the next few months, but the questions that won't get answered, we'll get back to you guys on there at a better time. But thank you very much for joining.
Yeah, thanks everyone for putting up with me for an hour. And if you ever need anything, drop me a line. I can answer it offline too.
Thank you, James. Cheers, guys.